What's up, team? I'm former United States Army Ranger Joshua Thompson. When I was going through RASP back in 2020, one of my biggest fears when I was going through was the fact that I could get hurt, I could get injured, and therefore get dropped, get sent to a conventional unit. That was one of my biggest fears because that's something that's outside of my control. Because yes, I can do all this stuff to mitigate it, but sometimes luck is a part of the game, and that is why it's one of my biggest fears. That being said, in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple things that I personally did so that I could significantly reduce the amount of risk to injury so that you guys can take that with you to selection so that you guys can be successful and not have to worry about that as much because you're knowing you're doing exactly what you need to in order to prevent injury. But first, if you guys enjoy videos just like this, make sure you guys hit the like button and subscribe if you are new. We're almost at 5K subscribers. Thank you guys so much. All right, so the first thing that I did throughout RASP, throughout Ranger School, when I was continuously under the strain of rucks, when we're going on extremely long distance running, the physical strain that RASP puts you through was the fact that I took care of my feet. All right, whether it's RASP, Ranger School, SFAS, you guys are always going to be constantly on your feet, whether it's just standing in formation, whether you're going through a long, rigorous movement under a heavy rucksack, right? You guys are always going to be on your feet. You're going to be running everywhere. And because of that, you need to make sure that you maintain the health of your feet, because if you don't, you can imagine just how much more difficult the spike in difficulty these selections will be because your feet aren't healthy. These schools are notorious for giving guys blisters, trench foot, even micro fractures in their feet. If you don't maintain your health, you are going to not experience a good experience when it comes to selection. Especially if you go through that, let's say you go through that, you micro tore something in your foot, or you micro fractured your foot, and you get to the end and you don't get selected, and now you're permanently injured because you just decided to keep going. So what I personally did in order to prevent this, in order to make sure that my feet were healthy going in, was that building up to selection, I was making sure that I trained up my feet properly. And that means I was going on boot runs, I was going on ruck marches, and obviously guys, I started off with low mileage, like low volume, and then I built myself up, my feet built themselves up so that eventually I could get that mileage. If you just go straight into it, your feet are just gonna get messed up, guys. And that's not a good recipe for your career if you just get hurt just because you want to go straight into it. So the next thing I did, and this is something I took advantage of a lot more in Ranger School, because in Ranger School you can have these weird routes where people want to go through marshes or whatever. I don't know, you just get these weird movements because the alpha team leader or because of the security squad leader or whatever it is, you're gonna have some weird movements, and you are eventually gonna have to go through rivers, you're gonna have to go through stuff that makes your feet wet. And because your feet are gonna get wet, you're gonna have to try your best to keep them as dry as possible. And how do you do this? Well, the way that I did it was at every halt, change of leadership, or after my 12-mile ruck march during RASP, I always changed out my socks, because when I took them off, my feet were pruned. My feet were completely pruned up, and my boots at the time were Garmin's, and those boots didn't dry well. So you kind of have to know what you're working with, because if your boots do dry out quickly, maybe you don't want to change your socks. That being said, I always changed out my socks during these little downtimes, these little lulls in selection. It's really important that you take advantage of this time to maintain your health, maintain your feet health. I also utilized foot powder. You're gonna have the ability to use authorized foot powder when it comes to Ranger School, as well as RASP. I do believe they let you have it in RASP as well, because it is important in order to maintain your feet health. Also, another thing to caveat off of that, it's important to have the right boot. And so during my time at selection, I went through various amounts of boots. I went through Garmin's, I went through Oakley's. Yes, I took Oakley's to selection for whatever reason. I'm not sure if they're authorized for that kind of activity nowadays, but I definitely tried them out, and they're really good for like road ruck marches or whatever. That being said, eventually when I was in mountain phase and my Oakleys were just completely destroyed, I had to switch out those boots for something else. And what I ended up discovering was the Bellevilles. I tried these new boots on in the mountain phase PX, and I discovered throughout the rest of the duration of Ranger School that these things are extremely comfortable. They got enough support, and they dry out super fast compared to Garmin's. Garmin's do not dry out fast, guys. They are horrendous when it comes to drying. I actually love these boots so much that I recommended them to one of my Ranger buddies who was going to Ranger School after I got back. I was like, hey man, try these out. These things were amazing. I got them in mountain phase, and yeah, I think you'll appreciate. When he came back, he's like, dude, these boots were a lifesaver. So don't just take it from me, take it from two Rangers who went to Ranger School in the same pair of Belleville boots. And we both loved them. We both thought they were really great for that environment. This is the boot that I would recommend that you do. I'll have a link in the description for these exact boots. So the next thing that I took advantage of, particularly in RASP, was the fact that RASP has these foam rollers, and so it really encouraged you to stretch out. And so that's what I did pretty much every night, especially because at the end of every day, you went through a ton of smoking. Your body's probably torn to shreds. It's really, your legs are tight because you went through all this running, and because you went through all this strenuous activity during your day throughout RASP, I would stretch out at the end of every single day. And the way that I see it is RASP and these other selections is going to have this continuous strain on your body where you're constantly you're getting put strain on. And so that's going to add up over time. And if you do nothing about that, if you don't stretch out, if you don't do some of these other tips that I'm going to mention, that stuff's going to accumulate, and your risk to injury, even if you're above the standard, I personally think if I didn't do that stuff, I would have been way more susceptible to getting a risk to injury. Because guys, I did cross country in high school, and the most I've ever ran in my entire life wasn't cross country in high school. It was RASP, something to think about. So because you're going through all this strenuous activity during these selections, you should be prioritizing your recovery in every single aspect of your downtime. Whenever you aren't doing anything specific that's important, you need to prioritize your recovery. So to caveat off at that point, the next thing that I particularly did, especially when lights out, or when it was lights out, or whenever we got rest, was the fact that I took advantage as much as possible as getting as much sleep as possible. All right, there's no point in staying up past the point that is necessary. If you do that, you're only increasing the risk to injury and hurting yourself in the long run because you're gonna be more tired. You're not gonna win the pay to be a winner. And so guys, when you get that opportunity, just go to sleep. It's not worth getting that risk to injury, and it's not worth being that much tired the next day, especially when it comes to something extremely physically hard like selection, like RASP, like Ranger School. And that's what I did. I was strategic with my time. I was very strategic, saying, hey, I'm trying to recover as much as possible. If you guys go to the gym, you know that you don't build muscle in the gym, you build it while you're asleep, right? You go to the gym to tear your muscles down, and then when you sleep, your body adapts, not only building back that muscle, but adapting to that weight, and your body gives you more muscle so that it adapts and recovers. And when you're going through RASP, it's the same thing. Your body's getting teared up every single day. You're going to have to prioritize your sleep. All right, the next tip is something you're going to hear throughout your entire duration throughout the military. And that is you need to maintain proper hydration. This is especially important if you guys are like me and you're going through a summer cycle or something. Let me tell you guys a little story just to paint the picture of how important hydration is. So taking you guys back to 2020 when I was in pre-RASP, I was only in pre-RASP for a week, just a week. I specifically remember to this day the first run that we did, and it was a 10-mile run. We went out guns a-blazing, pre-RASP cadre like to, keep it spicy, and we go out on the airfield and we go around, and as soon as I get back, I just hear a lot of scuffle in the back as people start pouring in, and turns out there was actually 8 dudes who heat catted during that specific run. 8 individuals who heat catted. And then later in the week, we did more runs, we did more rucks. 2 more individuals heat catted. And yes, you can say these people may not have been physically prepared or whatever. One of the most important ways to make sure that you're not going to become a heat casualty is to make sure that you maintain a proper hydration level. Because if you guys do not know, if you become a heat casualty, you will automatically be dropped from RASP. And because you're dropped, then you get sent to a conventional unit, then you have to crawl your way back eventually. And if you do not want that to happen to you, make sure you're maintaining proper hydration. There is a reason why you have a CamelBak on your back at all times. Even if you don't become a heat casualty, because you're not hydrating properly, you're more susceptible to getting cramps, especially in a summer cycle. Guys, if you get a cramp and you're doing something that you need to perform, let's say you're doing a 5-mile run, you're doing a ruck march, and you have no way to alleviate that, say like a drip drop or something, because you didn't maintain proper hydration, you just shot yourself in the foot because now you can't perform in a task that you need to perform at. And also, you're not going to just be hydrating through your own efforts, right? You're not just going to be filling up your CamelBak and drinking from your CamelBak all the time. The cadre are going to give you hydration packets, right? They're going to give you drip drop, liquid IV, whatever brand they have at the time, they're going to give you that, especially if it's going to be some sort of physical event the next day. They're going to give you that hydration packet so that you can be pretty well hydrated for the next day. What I personally did, especially when I was rucking, I would always fill up 1 canteen full of drip drop, and every 10 minutes I would just take a little sip, just a little sip, because usually, I know this about myself, around the 10-mile mark is when I usually start cramping up. As soon as I start getting a cramp and I use this hydration packet, it'll immediately alleviate this cramp that I'm having for at least a couple minutes until I splurge again because I'm starting to get the cramp back. This is really important, especially as you start getting higher in the mileage when it comes to rucks. This was my secret when it came to finishing strong, because it will start to hurt on those higher mileages especially for me, particularly, it was around mile 10 is when I just started hitting a wall and started getting cramps. So I recommend conserving the liquid IV or conserving the hydration packet early so that you can use it later when you actually need it. And then finally, the number one thing that you can do in order to prevent injury when it comes to selection is making sure you come physically prepared. If your body is used to all this high volume activity before you go, then you are way less likely to get injured in the process of doing it at selection. It's still going to be hard, but it's not as hard as some other person. You're going to be less likely of a heat casualty. You're not going to strain your muscles because your muscles are used to that kind of volume. And then technically you won't need as much hydration because your body's more efficient. That being said, do not neglect the past tips, because the last thing you want to do is play with fire and get dropped from selection because you are not playing to win. Also, the physical standard is there for a reason. If you're just barely meeting the standard, you're way more likely to get injured, because this is basically them saying this is what is required for you in order to not likely get injured. Another reason why you wouldn't want to show up to selection being under the standard is because, at least in RASP, when it came to RASP, it pays to be a winner, right? You're going to hear that throughout the entire duration of RASP. It pays to be a winner. And if you are someone who just barely scraped by and your peers are like pretty much far above you, you're not going to be able to take advantage of pays to be a winner as often. For example, when I was getting smoked or when we're going on a run, whenever there's like a clear finish line where the cadres say just go this far, just go 100 meters and then stop, just go to the cadre over there and then come back. Whenever there's like a clear objective, it's a pay to be a winner event. And usually what ends up happening is, if you're usually within the top 10 dudes who get done with that activity first, then you usually get pulled off in a group aside from everyone else, and you just get to take a break while everyone else is still they still got to struggle, they got to do more reps, they got to go another lap or whatever, because it pays to be a winner. I remember getting back from this 5-mile run. We got back to the barracks, and as soon as we got back there, the cadre just started counting off people. 1, 2, 3, and they got to me, 7. I hear 8, 9, 10, and then I hear the cadre yell, stop. They pulled us 10 off to the side, and they're like, candidates, it pays to be a winner. Go upstairs, shower, get ready for the day. All right, see you at whatever time it was. And we went upstairs. The remaining 150 dudes had to go out for another run. I don't know how long they were out there for. All I know is they went out, they ran for a little bit, and they came back in a formation, and they had to start doing the creed over and over. They kept messing it up. And yeah, we were just chilling, laughing at them in the barracks. So guys, it pays to be a winner. This is why I say it's so important to exceed the standard and not just meet it, because you're ultimately, yes, making life easier on yourself, but you're significantly reducing the risk to injury. And this is all just by being in better shape than your peers. Anyways, guys, those are the tips that I applied when I was going through RASP, Ranger School, in order to prevent injury when I was going through these schools. So as you can see, almost all these tips are gradual, right? They might seem really small and insignificant, but if you are consistent in applying with these tips, then at least in my mind, my risk to injury was a lot lower than some other people who may not have stretched out, who may not have applied some of these tips. The way that I think about it is, let's say in RASP, right, you're constantly getting tore up, right? Here's where you are, here's where your body's at in terms of strain. Every single hour, every single day in RASP, the strain gets higher and higher and higher. Right? This is homeostasis right here. And the more strain put on your body, the higher risk to injury, right? Up here is injury. The way that I viewed it is, when I'm stretching out, I even it out. I'm starting to even it out. When I hydrate properly, I'm starting to even it out. When I'm taking care of my feet, I'm evening it out, so I'm reducing the risk to injury. That's the way I thought about it when I was going through, but take that as what you will. But that's gonna do it, guys. Those are the things that I applied in my selection in order to prevent injury. If you guys thought this video was informative in any way, make sure you guys hit the like button and subscribe if you are new. If you guys thought I missed anything or would like to add your thoughts, comment down in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.